Welcome to a new episode of the Prosperity on Air podcast. I'm your host, Paola De Vescovi, and I'm very honored to have here with me today Margreeth van der OOrd. Margreeth, forgive me if I mispronounced your name. Margreeth lives in the Netherlands near Amsterdam at the North Sea coast. And she's very fortunate to wake up in the morning and have a beautiful view over the sea. She has been a principal in a school. She studied psychology. Then she went to New York and became familiar with management. She studied management. She became an entrepreneur and learned how to manage crisis, and she contributed to renew school systems. She also was involved in social issues in big cities where she created solutions also for large companies. She experienced divorce, then she met the love of her life, as you will hear in our interviews, but unfortunately her husband got ill, and this life experience that she had led her to look more deeply into wellness and health and the influence of stress. So she developed a national support system for partners of post-cancer patients, and she organizes groups and she teaches cancer patients and their families about resilience. She is also a certified mindfulness and meditation teacher, and she has turned this very difficult experience of her life and her knowledge into an opportunity to help other people who are experiencing difficult situations, cancer patients, the partners, the bereaved, and those who are facing trauma. And now she offers her work to the world, to the intention really of helping as many people as possible to learn, to experience joy in their life regardless of the circumstances, and find happiness and peace inside themselves, and resilience, and also the importance of accepting their own grief and the difficult experiences that they are living. I don't want to say too much because you will hear from Margreeth herself about her life experience, and our conversation in this interview is really a very deep one, and so I really hope that not only you will enjoy it, but that this conversation may benefit you as much as it did benefit myself. This episode is offered by my group coaching program, Business Prosperity Foundation, that is starting on October the 1st. It's a program for women entrepreneurs and professionals, but as well as for women who may have a business idea that they want to explore. It's an 8-week group coaching course, intended also to be a sacred space where we can realign our own personal energy with the energy of our business, because the two energies are very strictly connected. It's a program that I intentionally run at this time of the year, around the autumn equinox. It is a time when we honor the harvest of our efforts, of our intentions that maybe we set at the beginning of the year, and we prepare the soil for a new cycle that can maybe more in line with our core values and what we really deem important in our life. So if you want to know more about the program, you will find the link in the show notes of this episode. So without any further ado, let me introduce you to today's guest. Margreeth, thank you. I'm very happy that you're here with me today.
Thank you for having me. Yes.
So I have already briefly introduced you to our listeners, but I would like you to tell something about yourself, what you do, and how you decided to do what you're doing today.
Okay, thank you. Well, Paola, I had wonderful times in my life with a lot of good and strong winds under my wings. But I also had events in my life that were very difficult. And looking back on them, they were like points in my life that were very meaningful. With every difficulty, I decided to start a study to dive deeper into the topic because I was curious and I wanted to know more about it in detail. For instance, I became a school teacher. That's where my career started. Working with young children, and I love young children. They're so open and, everything is possible. And they're willing to explore everything, so that's a lot of fun. But after being a principal of a school, I decided to dive a little bit more into modern psychology. So I started studying psychology. And then by good fortune, my life showed up in New York City. And living in New York City, I had a wake-up call because I was working for one of the persons in the world who is very famous at this moment and who has a lot of impact on the whole world. And in that time, it's a long time ago, I was a young puppy. But I had a wake-up call thinking, okay, I myself would like to make a difference in the world, but I would like to do it in a completely different way, where we support each other and where everyone is included and not excluded, and where life is not only about money, but also about happiness and friendliness. But I also was curious about how it works in Holland. So I decided to stop my study psychology when I came back to Holland. And I started studying management because I wanted to see how our companies are handling human life. Do they work for money only or for the well-being of the world? So after my study in management, I became a recruiter. And I was so fortunate to look into all kinds of organizations. And still wanting to make a change in the world, but in a different way, I decided to become an entrepreneur right after my divorce. That was another difficult part in my life. I was married and we were not happy together. So it ended up in a divorce, and I decided not to be dependent on his financial support, and I wanted to become an entrepreneur and combine being independent with doing something for the world that makes it a little friendlier. So I'm still an entrepreneur. And I deepened that study even more. And I became a crisis manager in school organizations. And we had a lot of difficulty in our society, so in our schools as well. And it was wonderful to renew our the field of education and to be more inclusive for and creating chances, creating possibilities for everyone and not only for the fortunate. Mm-hmm. So that's what I've been doing a long time. And then I met the love of my life.
Wow.
Yeah. Once I said to myself, I will never get married again. But yes, I did. It was wonderful. And when we were together for a year and a half, he was diagnosed with cancer, which was not curable. And the hospital had told him that he would have 1 year of quality of life, and then maybe he would live for a year and a half. So that was a hard hit. That was a very hard hit because we were in love. We had just met each other, and we wanted to create mountains together. So anyway, after 3 years, that was a turning point. After 3 years, we discovered that his life would continue for a while, that he would not die immediately. And that gave us a huge chance in our private life to find ways, a last chance to really make it work. I had a marriage before which ended up in a divorce, and he had 2 of those. So we were so aware of this was a last chance to figure out how 2 people so different could live a life that would both which would give support to both of us and will raise happiness and a sense of well-being, even under difficult circumstances. So we did, and maybe the difficult circumstances like death in our midst. So it was a relationship with 3 instead of 2. That difficulty made it more urgent, but also was an invitation for ourselves to give the best possible. And I refer to really wanting to understand the other person and being loyal and being honest and trustworthy and showing up behind our own mask. If I was sad and if it was too difficult, because sometimes it's just too difficult, just be open about it, open-hearted about it, and open-minded, and being willing to find ways together that support each other, and we did. And during that time, I was connected with a lot of other women who had partners with prostate cancer, because that was what he had. Mm-hmm. And they were facing all the same difficulty as I. But I was a teacher and a trainer and a coach. So I decided to make a program, a national program for all the women who were partners of prostate cancer patients in the Netherlands. And so I support a lot of women in our country, and later on I brought that program into organizations who work with cancer patients. And So I had more time to spend with my husband at the end of his life. He lived for 13 years with his disease, and 2 weeks before he died, he told me he was so happy, and that he had no weight on his heart whatsoever, and that his mind and heart were free. And well, this is grief, that keeps this part of my experience, my life experience, which changed, of course, was a life-changing event. That grief, that kind of grief, is love and is happiness of that what we shared. And it has the face of tears and sadness, but actually it's love and being very grateful of the time we had together. So after he died, after 3 years, I decided to start another study to look more deeply into loss and grief. And I just finished, it was a study in America, in California, and I just finished it in June this year. And so I specialized in not only loss and grief, but also in trauma.
Yes.
Because trauma is also a life-changing event, and it's beyond our control. So that is what happens with every single human being. We have wind under our wings. We all face difficult times. We all have in ourselves the possibility of resilience. And now I'm going to offer my own experience and the knowledge of all those studies together, of course, into the world. I offer it to the world, and I hope a lot of people can benefit from it. Women and men, of course.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's beautiful that you turned such a difficult challenge into an opportunity of growth.
Right.
Of growth as a person and of growth as a person in a relationship. And it's also amazing the fact that you shared this with your husband. And so he was growing in this challenge too. As you said, life is made of happy moments, challenges, more difficult moments, sadness. There's all these nuances in life, and in a way, thanks God, because if it was all the same, it would be extremely boring, and there wouldn't be any possibility of growth. I mean, we grow through challenges because they force you to, see aspects of yourself, see where you have to change, where you have to try and do something different, and maybe a different strategy to overcome that specific challenge.
Yes.
And you now use the word that is very, very important, that is resilience. So I would like to ask you, what is resilient, and how can we develop the resilience muscle in our life?
Wow, that's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me start by saying resilience is a natural part of us. When we look, for instance, at where life is coming from, we trace back to 200,000 years ago as humans, and our DNA, the DNA in every and each one of us is traced back 200,000 years ago. And the DNA survived everything. It survived hunger, it survived climate changes, ice age, Neanderthalers. People had to travel to different parts in the world to survive. I have checked my own DNA, and it comes from Central Africa and traveled to Southeast Asia, from Southeast Asia in time to Spain, Portugal, Ireland, England, Scandinavia, and ended up in the area where I live now. But if you really think about resilience, it's an inbuilt, natural strength to survive the most difficult things of life. And yet, not everyone facing difficulties in these days are able to deal or able to cope with it. You can get lost in the difficulties in our complex human society at this moment. So, to not get lost in the difficulties, I find it very important, and it's one of the key things I believe, is to be aware and stay aware and strengthen your own possibility to see that there is still beauty, even if you are in difficult times. To be aware that there is still beauty, that there is still something you can be grateful for, that there is still water you can drink, there is still food on your table or help, support of other people, that you're not all by yourself, but that there always are friendly, compassionate people somewhere who are willing to support. So if you are able to stay connected and stay in touch with the beauty of life itself, even if it's very small, if you see a nice flower, or if you see a rainbow, or a sunset, or a child having fun, or touching somebody's hand, these things I find very important to not get lost in difficult times.
So small things always.
Just the small
happiness.
things.
Yes. Yeah. And there is also another thing in difficult times where there is a loss of a person, but also maybe difficult times in your business or in your relationships. We tend as human beings to, especially now in these times, to look for a solution outside of ourselves, as if, there is something out there that can change things for us, while turning within and also maybe accepting your emotions, because we've labeled these emotions as, positive and negative emotions, but emotions are emotions, and maybe what we call the negative ones are simply emotions that are causing some discomfort in myself, but they are human and they are necessary.
Yes, I agree. That's one of the things I've been studying with those neuroscientists the last 2 years, and exactly what you're saying, like, difficult feelings, difficult emotions will bring difficult negative thoughts like it's not good enough, or I'm not good enough, or it should be different, or I don't want this, or I cannot have this, or and those emotions which are limiting our happiness and have influence on our sense of happiness. Those thoughts, they stick like glue. And they make up 75% of our daily thoughts. That's our natural way of how we are wired, how our brain is wired. So therefore, it's very important to broaden, to practice on the things we really appreciation, because 25% of our brain is focused on the happy things. So that's a minority, right? And they don't stick. They just vanish like the wind. So we have to practice to be really aware of them and to be on the lookout for them. Yes, that's right. And happy thoughts make happy hormones in our body. So it's a win-win situation as well. It strengthens our cells and our hormone system, and our whole body system. Yes. So, and of course, sometimes it's too difficult to change, to give attention to the beautiful things that are still there. Sometimes it's better to go out in nature and or start running or go swimming or whatever.
Do something physical, you mean?
That's right. But yesterday I was connected. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yesterday I was connected with someone, and she told me she has lost a child, and she's making a beautiful magazine to support people in the same circumstances. And I told her I asked her, how are you? Because not everyone survives in a marriage. She said, "Oh no, I'm divorced." She lost a child a year ago. She said, "I divorced because my husband, it was too difficult for him. He started drinking and using drugs, and we have lost each other." And things like this happen. That's the reality of human life. It's very difficult to handle severe problems.
Yes. And as we said, you have to find the strength and the solutions inside yourself. They cannot come from outside. Yes, from outside you can receive support and from people around you, but then everything is inside yourself.
Yes, the resilience must come from yourself, from within. Yes.
And while you were saying about we spending 25% of our thoughts focusing on positive good things, and then the rest 75% is about ruminating about negative things, it would be much more profitable to ruminate on positive things. It's unbelievable how our mind works. I mean, we tend to stick to the negative when it is the positive, that brings us joy, strength, energy, and then we ruminate on the negative ones.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we need to raise our concentration on the positive ones.
Yes. You, of course, you were saying that it is important also to accept your grief, and your grief is also a manifestation of love. And so these negative emotions that are just uncomfortable emotions are normal, are human, and it's something that we have to learn and accept. So compassion, it is very important to be compassionate and also self-compassionate. So compassionate towards others who are going through difficult times, but self-compassionate when we are experiencing the difficulties and the grief and the negativity sometimes.
Yeah. So with trauma and with grief, there are two parts basically that are important. The first part, and you mentioned this, Paola, is acceptance. And that's a very hard thing to do, to learn to accept the past. What it needs is to give up hope for that the past will be better. So learning to accept that's something where some people are getting lost, and the other part is the action that is needed to build a new future. Mm-hmm. Because life is never the same after trauma, never the same after loss, and you yourself change. So the third component you mentioned, it's so wonderful that you bring this up, because self-compassion is another key. And self-compassion is not accepting that that you don't have. It is. It's accepting that you sometimes don't have energy, that you sometimes feel all these emotions, that you don't know what to do, that you have no idea how to build a new future. These moments, and taking care of yourself in these moments with friendliness and with kindness, that's so important. I have to tell people this because people tend to be strong for themselves, to beat themselves up, that they have to go on and that they have to know how to build a future, and that they, that you need to have control over life. Well, but life brings you in a place where you've never been before. It's like it brings you on a different planet. So you need to find, and it needs time to find new ways to, with your new self, to build your new self and to know what you want to do with your skills and with your talents and with your love and with your experiences. Yes, that needs time. Self-compassion is very important. And also when you lose people, because with loss and trauma and with grief, not everyone stays with you, because people don't always know how to deal or how to support you, so they will leave you. Friendship will be gone, and family sometimes will ask you, well, are you over it while you're just in the middle of it, or while grief will be always part of your experience? And so self-compassion is one part, and compassion in general is another part. You go through this yourself. It's an initiation in life, and others sometimes have no clue. They just don't know. So don't be too hard on them when they just don't understand what's going on.
Yeah, and vice versa. You don't know what other people are going through.
Oh,
So sometimes some harshness or, the difficult person that you are dealing with, maybe behind this person there's, suffering, feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah.
God knows what this person, may be going through, and we don't know. And sometimes we react, aggressively to certain situations.
Definitely. Yeah. It's good to understand that there is no single person in the world who has no difficulties, who is without difficulties.
Yeah.
So it's collective, and at the same time it is highly individual to find new ways and to do that in such a way that you don't do harm to yourself and don't do harm to others. Yes. Yeah.
Margreeth, you are an entrepreneur. I am an entrepreneur. I mean, most of my clients are entrepreneurs. So what we've said so far, I think also applies to failure. This is another big challenge, also when you failed in your business. You go through big challenges where maybe, your self-worth is questioned, your abilities, your, entrepreneurial skills are challenged. Maybe you are experiencing a big loss, and you have to maybe, make also difficult decisions. Maybe, you have to fire some employees. So there's a lot going on there. So what we said about resilience, about self-compassion, about, life-changing experience also applies to that, doesn't it?
Yes, of course it does. Immediately, then there is no boundary between business or personal life events. I mean, we are our business, right? So, yes, it will influence our business, influence other lives. And I think feelings about failure could come up. We have 72 different emotions, and I think all these 72 emotions will come up. So failure is one of them. Yeah, I should have whatever you can think, but yeah, of course.
Yes. I know that you have also specific practices that you teach your clients that help them, reduce the effects of trauma in their body, in their mind, in their spirit. So can you give us an example of one of these practices that can be helpful in difficult situations like this?
Yes, let me go over this. We have been talking about regaining resilience by finding the causes of happiness, right?
Yes.
That's one.
Yes.
And training the mind to stabilize the thoughts, the emotions, and regulate the sensations and emotions, to prevent the relapse into depression, negativity, anxiety, sleeplessness. I have practiced for that as well. And that's a mind training while people are in silence, so they can regulate the emotions in the body, because every thought has its trace in the body. So it's a body-mind training, right? I also, in order for change to happen, it's very important that our nervous system can stop the fight, flight, or freeze mode. So I have practices for that, so people can activate the care system where the emotions will be regulated and our nervous system will calm down. So that will help to have a more positive outlook on the world, to see possibilities, and to become creative, to feel it's a feed for the resilience. And we talked about self-compassion, so that's part of my my program as well. And if people would like to, I can help them to establish a daily practice. It's not a quick fix. A real life-changing event. It wouldn't be very skillful if I would say, oh, we can do a quick fix. We can't. It takes time, and a daily practice would be very helpful, right? To not get lost in all those difficulties.
Yeah.
So, and of course I can help reduce traces of trauma. Yes. Sometimes a person needs more help. So I will tell them, I can point a direction for more specific help when there is severe trauma. But I can help reduce the traces in the body. So it could be a training, but it could also be coaching. When a person is in direct help, in direct need, who is facing with severe loss, and there is panic, there is anxiety, and there is depression, I can offer a one-to-one sessions, and it can be done online. When we use the Zoom program, we can connect on a heart-to-heart basis. It's really possible. I do offer these sessions to a person in Tokyo, in Washington, D.C., in Florence, and also in Holland, because there are some terminal cancer patients I support and I guide, and they are not able to drive, to come towards me, or it's too tiring to meet in person on location. We do a one-to-one session on Zoom. So that's all possible. Is that answering your question?
Yes, it does. And I know that you have a special gift for our listeners. So for those who want, who need to have support, or they want to know about you, and they want to, try your method, your system, you are offering a free 30-minute session.
Yes.
So in the show notes, you will find the link to get in touch with Margreeth and book a free session with her. And that's really so nice of you to offer this special gift. But I would also like to, if you can tell them where they can learn more about you, if you have websites, social media, links that you want to share.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes. First of all, everyone is welcome for that free session of 30 minutes. If that could be helpful, I would love to provide that space. And also, I can be found on LinkedIn, Facebook, of course, and I have a website. Maybe you can put it.
Yes, I will put all the links
Yes, because that's hard to pronounce in English.
Yes.
So it's a website in Dutch. I also, but they can read some part of it in English on my website. So
okay, so we will put all the links to reach you and to know more about you and the wonderful work that you do in the show notes. And I thank you so much for being here with me today. And I think that we can schedule another episode, maybe on, we can go deep into some of the topics that we've touched upon today.
Well, I thank you so much for your beautiful questions and the connection and this opportunity to let people know that it's possible to find help when they need it.
Yes, and that they are not alone.
That they're not alone. Thank you so much, Paola.
Thank you. I'm sure you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. It was a very deep episode, an episode where I learned a lot. It was a very important reminder, especially of the fact that it is up to us to decide how we want to react to and what we want to do with our life experiences, especially the difficult ones. So, as I said, if you want to know more about Margreeth, her work, if you want to get in touch with her, you will find all the links in the show notes of this episode. And I wish you a wonderful week, and I will see you next week with a new episode of the Prosperity On Air podcast. Bye for now.